Morning class, here we are, day 2, shooting some videos for you guys. Yesterday we left it off, we were prepping the opening, we were shimming, we were getting everything straight, getting it ready for the door installation. Today we're going to temporarily attempt to fit the door in, take a look, see how everything's fitting, making sure everything's right. I've come back and rechecked my opening with my level, making sure that everything was still proper. Holding it against my shims to make sure that my door hinges are going to be perfectly in line, making sure I'm staying on plumb. Everything is still good today. No hoodlums came in here last night and did anything to my house tearing it up, so that's a good thing. We're going to take the door now and we're going to set it in the hole. And I talked yesterday about we wanted to line it up so it was centered on this opening. Now, I held it up there earlier and I noticed that I'm about 5/16, maybe 3/8 of an inch off the center, which means I need to add a little bit more shim here. So when I set the door in the hole, we checked the floor yesterday. We made sure the floor was good, or it appeared to be good. Then we're going to take the door and we'll set it in the hole and we'll slam it up against these shims to make sure that it's sitting properly. And you can see where I'm a little bit off of center. So I'll add some more shim to these sides before I set the door permanently. In order to do that, I've got to go and find some shim stock. Now the other thing I'm looking at is when it is all the way up here like this, if you look at this section right here called the reveal, this is the amount of opening, you'll notice it is not parallel. Now in the middle, I can pull it up or down when I'm shimming, and when I'm doing my final attachment, I'll pull it up or down and get it perfectly straight. But in the end, this is a little bit smaller than this. Well, that tells me that before I put the door in, I'm gonna have to slide a little bit of shim up underneath the very bottom of this leg. I can slide just a little piece in and see what that's going to do to my frame once I'm in place. There's looking a little bit better. That might even be just a touch too much, but you see that here, when I pull this down, I'll have that reveal will be the same all the way across. So I'll come in and deal with that when it comes time to hang the door. In the meantime, we've got to go cut some shims. Typically, when you get ready to start trimming out a house, you have a whole bucket or a box of just random size stuff. We use these shims. When we use these, as we talked about yesterday, we always use 2 opposing each other and build it out to whatever thickness we want, but we never use 3, 4, 5 shims to do that. We're going to come in with some flat stock, and we're going to use the flat stock to build it out and then let the shims do the fine tuning for us. So I determined that this is somewhere around 5/16 of an inch. Well, I've got 3/8 plywood, I have 1/2 inch plywood, I have 3/4 inch boards, but nothing down at the 5/16 side. Could I redo my shims and start all over again? Yeah, I probably could, but I'm not going to. We're going to work on the table saw a little bit. So we come over to the table saw, and the first thing, I don't know who stepped on my push stick, but they boogered it all up, but it's still plenty long. It's a whole lot safer than putting my fingers in there. First thing we do when we come up to the table saw is we're going to inspect the table saw. We want to make sure that our equipment is in good shape. We want to inspect our blade. We want to check everything, make sure all our measurements are right. But before we do anything, we're going to unplug the table saw. We never want to do any adjusting or anything while the table saw is plugged in. On this particular table saw, we do have a removable guard. We can pop off, set it aside. This is our anti-kickback dogs here. They too come out. And then this would be what's called a riving knife. And a riving knife goes up and down with the blade as you raise and lower the blade. A splitter typically stands straight up and it stays in a fixed position, and it's always kind of sort of in the way. This is removable. I can open it up in here, taking out the throat plate, reach down in and remove this riving knife by dropping it down into position so that it's completely out of my way. There are times on every job that you have to do cuts without the guard on. Most dangerous cut is a cut without the guard, or specialty cuts or things like that. But I can drop this riving knife down out of the way, which is nice. Or I can put it right back where it's supposed to be. I want to make sure it's mounted properly, tight, making sure all my equipment is clean and ready to go. Popping my throat plate back in. Now, When we're using this, we want to inspect our blade. We want to check the blade, make sure it's sharp, blade's properly mounted, everything's tight like it's supposed to be. This blade looks like it's a little bit worn, but I think it'll be just fine. Looks like somebody cut some PVC on there. When we're cutting our wood, we want to make sure that we adjust so that we're always cutting 1/4 of an inch above the stock that we're cutting through. So this one here would be approximately 1/4 of an inch. My teeth sticking up about 1/4 of an inch above my wood. That way, if I were to cut my finger for some crazy reason, cut my finger, I'm only cutting 1/4 of an inch off where it's not going to come completely off. So I'm going to put my equipment back on, which is always tons of fun. Because anytime I'm cutting, I'm wanting to do that. Also, we want to make sure that we're using our safety glasses, hearing protection if necessary. We want to make sure all our clothes are tight fitting, no jewelry hanging down, no jewelry on our hands, no bracelets, no watches, anything like that that can get hung up. And it's not just about it getting hung up in the blade, it's about it getting hung up on a piece of equipment where it gets you in an awkward position and then you're doing something that's not really safe. You want unencumbered, be able to push the wood through the saw without any issues. So we're going to check our saw, we're going to look at it. Again, we're going to make sure that our settings are on 0. We're going to check, because the last guy might have used this saw and he might have been cutting it on a 2-degree angle, and you can't walk up here and look at it and say, yeah, that's perfect. You want to look down at the gauge, making sure that the gauge is proper, and you want to make sure it's at 0 degrees. We have a knob over here where we can raise and lower. We have a lever where we can bend it and turn it side to side to give us an angle on the blade. Should have an automatic stop that's stopping it at 90 degrees. This would be our miter fence that we use for cross cutting. We're going to use a miter fence, and again, you want to make sure that it's set up at 90 degrees when you get ready to use it. We never cut any wood that is wider than it is long. If we were cutting this piece, we would never run this through on this fence wider than it is long. We would always do this in a ripping position so that we're running along the length of it. Any cut like this has a tendency to want to turn that wood. It gets in a bind between the blade and the fence, causing a kickback, which would be dangerous. So we want to cut a piece of this wood. We talked about we need it to be 5/16 of an inch. This is 3.5 inches wide. I have to account for the thickness of the blade. I'm going to come in and I'm going to run it through. I've got it set up at 1/4 of an inch above my blade. I want to keep my fingers 6 inches away from the blade, and I want to have my push stick handy at all times. I set it here. I know where it is. It's right where I need it to be. I'm going to put my guard down, ready to go, and I'm going to plug in my table saw. Table saw is nice. It's not on a flat surface. It's not going anywhere. Everything about it is good. I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to get my wood up here. I'm going to start my cut, never using my left hand to push or pull the material through. I'm going to get it as far as I can. Once this back end is on top of the table, I will then take this and push it the rest of the way through, completely clearing the blade before I stop. We're going to step back away from the saw, wait for the blade to stop. We're not going to reach in and grab this while that blade is still spinning, because it's not going to, it can get hung up in that blade and then it can come flying out at us. We got a piece here. I haven't set up the thickness of it yet. So this piece is at 5/16 of an inch. So I'm going to continue on making some shims, and then we'll roll from there. I will check back with you in the next video. We'll be taking our shims and we'll be going over to the chop saw, working on the chop saw to cut them to length. See you on the next one.